So once you figured out what conversation you need to have, once you figured out what it is you really want long term, right? The next thing you have to do before you have that conversation is you have to what we call master your stories. Now I've got news for you. Without any training whatsoever, you are all master storytellers. You don't have to admit to this if you don't want to, but most of the time people are pretty cool with it. If you've driven in Illinois, right? You have probably told yourself a story. Anybody who drives slower than you is an idiot, and anyone who drives faster than you is a maniac. Because if you're stuck behind that idiot, you believe this idiot? Whoa, look at that maniac go, right? We all tell ourselves, and it happens that quickly, right? So you have to master your stories. The first part of mastering your stories is understanding what we call your path to action, okay? And with your path to action, there's a couple steps here. It's first, what is it that we saw? What is it that we heard? What is it that you actually saw? What is it that you actually heard, right? Based on that, what typically happens is we tell ourselves a story. We see somebody driving, we're stuck behind somebody slow. We see somebody speeding down the road. We immediately tell ourselves a story. Those stories generate feelings, right? That about that person who's driving slow, about that person who's speeding down the road, and then based on those feelings, that drives our actions or our behaviors. Does that make sense? So based on what we see, based on what we hear, right, we tell ourselves a story, because we're all master storytellers. Not one of you flinched when I said idiot or maniac, not one of you. That's part of it, but the next part of that is that generates a feeling, right? And those feelings are going to determine our actions, what it is that we actually, how we behave. Does that make sense? So part of that process is separating fact from story, which is what is it that we actually saw and what is it that we actually heard, as opposed to what we think we saw and what we think we heard. And that can be a real challenge, because separating the facts from our stories about those facts, that can take a while. You have to be, in some cases, brutally honest with yourself about what it is you actually saw, what you actually heard. Okay. The next part of mastering your stories is watching for 3 clever stories. Victim, villain, and helpless. Just the victim here, right? As opposed to the villain in the story, right? And then I'm helpless. There's just nothing I can do. That's just the way it is. There's nothing I can do about it. Watch for those stories. When I do this workshop on a regular basis, that watching for those 3 clever stories, victim, villain, helpless, those are the ones that typically resonate, because start listening to people talk. Listen to your coworkers, listen to your family, listen to your other volunteers, and you'll go, victim story, villain story, helpless story, right? It's really easy, and identifying that becomes a crucial step in kind of mastering this. So if you hear yourself or someone else telling a victim story, here's the question that you ask. What's my role? If I'm saying that I'm the victim, what is my role in this situation? What is it that I did? What is it that I said? What is it that I didn't do? What is it that I didn't say that I should have that got me in this situation? Right? Does that make sense? Because part of that is kind of owning up that you may not be completely blameless in this scenario. Okay. The villain. This was a little bit longer. Why would a reasonable, rational, decent person do this? Now, where I just retired from, I was working with a manager, and they were talking about a particular employee, someone on their team, and they were telling a fantastic villain story. And I said, okay, why would a reasonable, rational, decent person do this? And this manager didn't even blink. They said, because, Doug, they are not a reasonable, rational, decent person. And I said, really? And so we talked through it, and basically what we came down to is this person thought these mistakes or these details that they weren't paying attention to, no big deal. It's just a little minor, but we can fix it on the back end. It's no big deal, right? What they didn't realize is that they were creating a ton of work for other people on their team who had to fix it. And that was not doing anything for their popularity on the team. But they weren't aware of it. They didn't see that connection. We made them aware of the connection. Oh, they felt horrible because they were really a decent human being. Like, oh, crud. Oh, I didn't realize. Right? But ask yourself, why would a reasonable, rational, decent person do this? The helpless situation, that helpless story, there's nothing I can do. Really, is there absolutely nothing you can do right now to move you towards what you want? You may not be able to solve the problem in the next 10 minutes, in the next 5-minute conversation, but is there something you can do? Again, the scenario that I've heard so many times is, well, that's just the system that I've got to work with. I don't have control over it. I kind of helped launch a campaign where we said, okay, every time you run into these, document it, take it to your manager. And after you start building a case like, oh, this is a problem that comes up often, let's go back and talk to the engineers, let's see if we can't fix this problem, all right, and move this up our priority list. Okay? So, watch for those 3 clever stories, victim, villain, helpless, and when you find yourself or someone else telling those stories, if you're the victim, what's your role? It's a villain, why would a reasonable, rational, decent person do this? And if it's helpless, is there really nothing you can do at this time to move you towards what you really want? Make sense? So you kind of got your heart in the right spot. What is it you want for yourself, for that other person, for your relationship? Mastering your stories kind of gets your head right? Kind of pulls you off that ledge, if you will, of how you're going to have that conversation. So now, after I have talked for way too long, now we're ready to start having a conversation. Okay? So when we get to that point, and you're ready to have a conversation, again, you've kind of done some thinking. Please do not start with, we need to have a conversation, right? We need to talk. There's something I want to talk to you about. There's something you have to use, now a good time, right? Kind of make it neutral, as unthreatening as possible, that you want to have that conversation. Realizing that the next step is what we call stating your path. Remember we talked about that path to action? Based on what we see, based on what we hear, we tell ourselves a story that determines how we feel, that feeling, those emotions determine our actions and our behavior. In a very quick, very simple way, we're going to walk the other person through our path to action. Okay, so we're going to, what we call state our path. S, you start with facts. You state your facts. When you do this, try not to get carried away. If you walk in with one of those big 3-inch binders, you should be in law school, but this is not going to make your conversation look good. Relate to about 3, maybe 5, just a handful of facts that are relevant to the appropriate conversation, content, pattern, relationship. Right? The last couple times I've asked you to do this, or you bring this up, and you brought it up here, right? You can then share those facts. This has happened on these dates, or when we get together in these situations. Then you can tell your story. Now, this is where mastering your stories really becomes important, because now, hopefully, you're not telling one of those clever stories where you're making that person out to be the villain. You're not making yourself out to be the victim. You're just telling a story. It leaves me to think. It leads me to conclude. I'm worried about, I'm concerned about. When I done this 2-day workshop, one of my coworkers, we talk about, telling yourself stories, and one of my coworkers just lashed onto that, and they basically say, the story that I'm telling myself is, you don't care. This isn't important to you. I'm not important to you. This issue is ridiculous, or whatever. And then that's kind of telling your story. Make sense? We start with facts because typically facts tend to be a little less threatening. You brought this up last Sunday. You brought it up, every Sunday for the last month when we get together, this happens, right? For the last 3 meetings or whatever. Those are facts. It tends to be a little less threatening. Then you can tell how those facts impact you, what your story is. Okay. One of the words that I have found to be really useful is the word concerned. I am concerned that, because it is in my experience that if I say that I'm concerned about you, most people don't have a very defensive reaction. Oh, they're concerned. Isn't that nice? Right? They're concerned about me. Because that's, we all kind of like that. Then here's the hard part. S, state your facts. T, tell your story. The A, ask for their paths. These are the facts that I'm aware of. Here's how these facts are impacting me. Here's the story I'm telling myself based on those facts. Then, how do you see it? What's this look like on your side of the table? Help me understand what I'm missing. Right? And then, it's an open-ended question. It's where most of us have a difficult time. Shut up. Remember, I said a conversation is a potluck? Let the other person contribute to the potluck. Let them say something. Otherwise, it turns into a lecture. And you might as well start it off with, we need to talk. Because that's typically how that goes. So, state your facts, tell your story, ask for their paths. It should be an open-ended question, and then shut up and listen. And sometimes the best thing you can do when you ask that question, something in your mouth so you can't talk. When you are stating your facts, when you are telling your story, it's important that you have some confidence in yourself, because those facts, those are the facts that you're aware of. Those are the facts, and the story that you're telling us of yourself is how those facts are impacting you. You have every right to feel that, to think that, to experience that. That's fine. What I'm going to ask you to keep in mind is you probably don't have all the facts. Right? So that's kind of the challenge on that. So again, this is the part that I know. Help me understand, what am I missing? How do you see it? What does it look like from your perspective? Okay. Make sense? When we talk about crucial conversations, we talk about silence and we talk about verbal violence. Silence is where people just shut down. Right? I cannot tell you how many meetings I've been in where all of a sudden things start to get a little intense, right? Somebody in that meeting suddenly remembers an email that they need to send or respond to, anything to kind of pull back, right, and withdraw from that conversation. That's going to silence. Sometimes you get in a conversation, people talk a little louder, they talk a little more forcefully, they talk a little more aggressively. That is verbal violence. Make sense? Before you get in that conversation, or as you get in that conversation, pay attention. Sometimes we get so focused on what it is we're going to say that we forget to read the room. We forget to read the room. So pay attention to them. Okay? Are they shutting down? Are they getting a little more aggressive? Because if they are, it's time to back off. We all live in Illinois. We are experts at getting stuck. Mud, snow, ice, we can get, you name it. We get all 4 seasons, we can get stuck there, right? And hitting the gas doesn't make it any better. Not really. So stepping back and realizing that can be a big portion of moving forward. Does that make sense? Questions? What's that? Oh, that's, you can,
Oh.
yeah. The storytelling was